The city was not like Earth. Its streets were made of black stone that glowed with strange light. Tall towers of metal reached high into the dark sky. Creatures of many shapes and colors filled the market. Some had wings, some had scales, some had long arms that touched the ground. It was not a place for the weak. In the center of the market, a crowd had gathered. The noise was loud, the smell of smoke and blood was in the air. At the heart of the crowd, a stage had been built with iron chains. And there, chained to a pole, stood a woman. But she was not human. Her skin was silver blue, glowing faintly under the strange lights. Her eyes were bright, sharp like fire. Even though her arms were tied, even though her back was bleeding, she stood tall. A voice rose above the crowd. $1, 1 whip. The crowd laughed and cheered. An alien with thick arms and 3 eyes stepped forward. He handed a coin to the guard, grabbed the whip, and struck the woman across her back. The crack of the whip echoed like thunder. The woman winced but did not cry. The crowd clapped and shouted. Another alien stepped forward. Then another. Each paid the coin, each took the whip, each struck the chained woman. Some laughed, some spat, some cheered with cruel joy. This was not punishment. This was not justice. It was only a game. The alien leader, tall and cruel with horns like knives, stood watching. His sharp teeth glistened as he laughed. Look at her. The warrior of her people, reduced to nothing. Pay your coins, take your turns. Show her who rules this world. The crowd roared. The woman's back was bleeding now, stripes of red against her silver skin, but her eyes never broke. She stared at the crowd with fire, with anger, with a spirit that chains could not destroy. And then, the crowd went silent, because someone new had walked into the market. He was not tall like the horned alien. He had no wings, no claws, no glowing skin. He looked ordinary. 2 arms, 2 legs, a simple face. Just a man. Just a human. But the way he walked, slow, steady, calm, made the crowd quiet. Some aliens whispered, "A human here?" Others laughed. What is he doing in this place? The human stopped near the stage, his eyes fixed on the woman. He saw the blood. He saw the chains. He saw the cruelty. The horned leader noticed him and sneered. Well, well. A human dares to watch. Do you want to play our game, little creature? $1, 1 whip. Even your weak hands can strike once. The crowd laughed again, but the human did not laugh. He did not move. His eyes were calm but sharp like a storm hidden behind still water. The woman on the stage turned her head. Her eyes met his. For a moment, the market disappeared. For a moment, it was only her and him. Her eyes asked, "Why are you here? Will you watch me suffer too?" The human said nothing, but he stepped closer. The crowd began to chant, "Whip! Whip, whip!" Coins clinked. The whip cracked again. The woman flinched but did not scream. The human's fists clenched. He looked at the whip. He looked at the leader. And then he looked back at the woman. Something in his eyes burned now, not fear, not hate. Something else. The horned leader grinned and held out the whip. "Come, human. Pay the coin. Show us your strength. Or are you as weak as your kind?" The human slowly reached into his pocket. The crowd leaned forward. They waited to see him join the game. They wanted to see if a human would prove cruel like the rest. He pulled out a single coin. He dropped it in the leader's hand. The crowd cheered. "Yes, yes. The human will whip her too." The leader laughed and handed him the whip. The human held it in silence. He looked down at the leather, heavy and dark with blood. He lifted it slowly. The crowd leaned closer, hungry to see the strike. The woman stared at him, her eyes steady. She did not beg. She did not plead. She only waited, and then the whip fell not on her, but on the ground. The crack echoed through the market. Dust rose, the whip lay at his feet, the crowd froze. Their laughter died. Their eyes went wide. The horned leader's smile faded. "What are you doing, human?" The human looked up, straight into his eyes. He did not shout. He did not boast. He only said in a calm voice, "No more." And the market held its breath. The whip lay on the ground, silent. The sound of laughter was gone. The whole market froze. The horned leader blinked, his smile turning into a scowl. "What did you say, human?" The man did not move. He stood tall, his eyes steady. His voice came again, quiet but sharp like a blade. "I said, no more." The crowd gasped. Some laughed nervously. Others hissed in anger. In this place, no one told the leader no. Not warriors, not slaves, not merchants. And yet this simple human had spoken those words like a command. The horned leader's eyes narrowed. You pay the coin, you take the whip. That is the rule. You refuse, you insult the game. And when you insult the game, you insult me. He stepped closer. The human did not step back. The chained woman turned her head, watching. Her silver eyes shone, not with fear, but with curiosity. Who was this man who dared to stand here? The leader grabbed the whip from the ground and raised it high. If you will not strike her, then I will strike you. The whip cracked through the air. The sound was sharp. The crowd roared, but when the strike landed, the human did not fall. The leather tore his back, leaving a deep red mark. His face tightened for only a moment, but his body did not bend. He stood straight, silent, his eyes fixed on the leader. The crowd gasped again. Some cheered for the cruelty. Others fell into silence, surprised that a human, weak, fragile, small compared to other species, could endure such pain without a sound. The leader growled. You think silence makes you strong? He whipped again. The second strike was harder. The human's skin broke, blood running down his shirt. But again he stood tall, his fists clenched, his breathing steady, his eyes locked on the leader. The woman whispered softly, almost to herself. Why does he not cry? Why does he not fall? The leader whipped again, and again. Each strike louder, sharper, crueler. The human's back was torn, his clothes ripped, but he did not collapse. His knees did not bend. His eyes, those calm, burning eyes, never looked away. Finally, the leader stopped, panting with anger. The whip dripped with blood, but not the woman's. It was the human's blood now. The crowd murmured, This is strange. Humans are weak. But this one does not break. Why is he doing this? He could leave. He could run. The leader spat, pointing at him. You think this makes you brave? You are nothing. You are a fool standing in the way of power. The human finally spoke again. His voice was calm, steady, low, but everyone heard. Power is not in cruelty. Power is not in chains. Power is not in the whip. The leader laughed. Then what is power, human? Tell us. The human's lips curved slightly, not into a smile, but into something stronger. Power is standing when the world wants you to fall. Power is choosing mercy when others choose pain. The crowd fell silent. His words were strange to them. No one in the market spoke of mercy. No one here believed in kindness. And yet the way he spoke made their hearts uneasy. The leader snarled. He turned to the crowd. Do not listen, he is weak. He bleeds, he breaks. Look at him. Soon he will die. But the woman, still chained, whispered again. No, he will not die. The human turned his head for just a moment, meeting her eyes again. In her silver gaze he saw fire. She had not broken either, though her body was torn. He understood her spirit, and now she understood his. The leader raised the whip one last time. He swung with all his strength, but this time something changed. The human's hand shot out. He caught the whip in midair. The leather burned his palm, cut into his skin, but he held it tight. The crowd gasped louder than before. The leader's arm trembled, but the whip did not move. The human had stopped it. The leader growled, pulling, but the whip would not return to him. Slowly, the human pulled it down, step by step, until the leader stumbled forward. The crowd erupted into chaos. Impossible! He caught the whip. Humans cannot do this. The human dropped the whip at his feet once more. He spoke again, his voice even calmer now, but heavy with meaning. This game is over. The leader's face twisted with rage. His horns shook as he roared. You dare shame me in front of my people? The human's eyes burned brighter, not with anger, but with something stronger. Conviction. He looked at the leader and answered, I do not shame you. You shame yourself. The crowd was silent. No one laughed now. Some aliens looked afraid. Others looked thoughtful, and some looked impressed. The woman, still bleeding, still chained, allowed herself a small breath of hope. For the first time since her capture, she believed change might be possible. And the human? He stood in the center of that cruel market, hurt and bleeding, but unbroken. His eyes told a story the crowd could not yet understand. It was only the beginning. The market was no longer laughing. The crowd that once cheered for pain now stood in uneasy silence. The whip lay on the ground again, useless. The horned leader's face burned with rage. His claws twitched, his teeth showed sharp in the dim light. Never before had anyone dared to shame him in his own game. He pointed at the human, his voice like thunder. You think you are brave? You think you can stand against me? The human's body was torn and bleeding. But his stance was unshaken. His eyes, calm yet burning, stayed locked on the leader. "I do not stand against you," he said softly. "I stand for her." The chained woman's breath caught. For so long no one had spoken for her. No one had stood for her. The leader growled, gripping the whip's handle once more, though it was no longer his weapon. His pride was broken, his fury rising. "Then you challenge me, human? And you will regret it." The crowd roared again, not with laughter this time, but with excitement. A challenge meant spectacle. A challenge meant blood. They circled tighter around the stage, their eyes glowing with anticipation. The leader stepped forward, towering above the human. His horns curved like blades, his muscles thick as stone. He struck the ground with his foot, shaking the stage. "You have one chance," he declared. "Pick up the whip. Strike her. Obey the rule. Or face me," the crowd shouted in agreement. "Obey the rule. Strike her. Face him if you dare." The human looked down at the whip. Blood stained its leather. It carried the cries of too many victims. His hand twitched, but not toward the weapon. Instead, he bent down slowly and lifted the whip, only to toss it aside. The leather fell with a dull thud, rolling into the dust. The market gasped. The human raised his head, his voice calm but steady. "I will never strike her. If you want me broken, you must do it yourself." The horned leader's eyes flashed red. He roared, a sound that shook the air. He charged forward, claws raised. The human stood still, waiting. The first strike came fast, a claw slashed toward the human's chest. The human stepped back just in time, the claws tearing through his shirt but missing his flesh. The crowd shouted in shock. The leader swung again, this time aiming for the human's face. The human ducked low, rolling to the side. His body moved slower than the alien's, weaker, but his focus was sharp. Every move he made was with purpose. The leader growled louder, frustrated. "You cannot fight me. You are nothing." The human straightened, blood dripping down his back, but his voice was calm. "I do not need to be stronger. I only need to stand," the crowd murmured. These words confused them. They were used to battles of force, of violence, of domination, but this human was fighting with something else, something invisible, something strange. The leader lunged again, faster, harder. His horns cut the air, aiming to pierce. The human sidestepped, barely escaping the deadly blow. Dust flew around them. The crowd's voices rose higher. Still, the human did not strike back. He only avoided, resisted, endured. Each time he moved, each time he refused to fall, the crowd grew more restless. The chained woman's eyes followed him closely. She had seen warriors fight before. She had seen them bleed, seen them kill. But this was different. This human was not fighting to win. He was fighting to prove something greater. The leader snarled, raising both claws now. "You cannot last forever," the human whispered to himself, words only he could hear. "I don't need forever, only long enough." The leader struck again and again. Each blow was harder, sharper, filled with rage. The human stumbled, his body weakening, but his eyes never lost their fire. Every time he was hit, he rose again. Every time he fell, he stood once more. The crowd was no longer cheering. They were whispering. "Why doesn't he fight back? Why doesn't he fall? Humans, what are they?" Finally, the leader stepped back, panting. His muscles trembled with rage. His pride had been challenged too long. "You will not fight me. Then I will end you now." He lifted both claws, ready for the final strike. The crowd held its breath. But before the blow could land, something unexpected happened. The chained woman's voice rang out. "Stop!" The sound was strong, sharp, commanding. For the first time, the leader froze mid-strike. The crowd turned toward her. Her silver eyes glowed brighter than before. She looked at the human, then back at the leader. "You call yourself strong, but you cannot even break one human. You call yourself powerful, but you fear his silence more than his fists." The crowd gasped. The leader's face twisted with fury. "You dare—" But the human interrupted, his voice calm as ever. "She is right." He stepped forward, bleeding but unbroken. His gaze locked on the leader, his words firm. "You have all the strength. You have the chains. You have the whip. But still, you are afraid. Afraid of one man who will not kneel." The market fell into silence again. The truth of his words spread like fire. The leader's fury could not hide it. The human raised his chin, facing him without fear. "So strike me if you must. Kill me if you can. But know this, every eye here has seen you fail." The leader trembled with rage. His claws shook. But his people were no longer laughing. And in that silence, the challenge had already begun. The leader's claws shook with rage. His chest rose and fell, his breath loud in the tense silence. The human stood in front of him, bleeding, bruised but unbroken. The chained woman's silver eyes never left him. She had seen many warriors fall before the leader. She had seen strong fighters break after only a few lashes. But this human, he was different. The crowd waited. No one cheered now. No one laughed. The market was holding its breath. The horned leader roared, his voice echoing through the air. You refuse the whip. You refuse to kneel. Then you will pay with your life. He raised his claw high, sharp and deadly, ready to end the human in a single blow. The woman's chains rattled as she tried to move. She shouted, her voice fierce, "No!" But her bonds held her back. The human did not run. He did not dodge. Instead, he stepped closer, closer to her. The leader's strike came down like lightning. The whip of claws cut across the air and landed, not on the woman, but on the human's back. The sound was like thunder. The force threw him to his knees. Blood spilled from his wounds, staining the stone. The crowd gasped, but the woman saw it. He had moved in front of her, shielding her body with his own. The leader blinked, confused. "What are you doing, human?" "Why take her pain?" The human coughed, blood on his lips, but his voice was steady. "Because no one should suffer alone." The crowd erupted in whispers. "He took the strike for her." "Why would he do that?" "No one does that here. No one." The leader's fury grew. "You think this makes you strong? You think this makes you a hero? You are nothing but flesh to break." He swung again. The claws tore into the human's side. He staggered, but once more he stayed between the woman and the leader. The woman's eyes widened. She whispered through her pain, "Why? Why protect me? You don't even know me." The human's head lifted, his gaze meeting hers. His words were soft, but they struck harder than any whip. "Because someone has to." The market was silent again. His words were simple, but they carried weight the crowd had never known. In their world, strength meant cruelty. Power meant chains. Yet here was a human bleeding for a stranger. The leader snarled, striking again and again. Each blow tore more blood from the human's body. His shirt ripped apart, his skin marked with deep wounds. Still he did not move aside. Still he stood between the woman and pain. The crowd's whispers grew louder. "This is madness. No, this is something else. What if this is true strength?" The leader finally stepped back, his chest heaving, his claws dripping red. He glared at the human who stood shaking, barely able to breathe. But his eyes still burned. "You cannot win," the leader spat. "You are weak. You bleed. You fall." The human staggered, then forced himself upright. His voice was faint but strong enough for all to hear. "Maybe I am weak. Maybe I bleed. But I will not let you break her spirit, and that you cannot defeat." The crowd gasped again. Some aliens looked at the leader with doubt now. For the first time, their eyes did not see only his strength. They saw his cruelty. And it did not look like power anymore. The woman's lips trembled. She had never believed anyone would fight for her. But here he was, broken, bleeding, still standing. Something inside her shifted. Hope. The leader roared, furious at the change in the crowd. "Enough! If you will not kneel, then you will die." He raised both claws, ready to strike with all his power. The human swayed on his feet, his body almost at its limit. But his eyes locked on the woman once more, as if telling her silently, "I will not move. I will not let him touch you." The claws slashed downward, and the human caught them. His hands, cut and bleeding, wrapped around the leader's arms. The crowd gasped as he stopped the deadly strike with sheer will. His knees bent under the pressure, but he held on. His eyes blazed with fire. The leader gritted his teeth, shocked. How can you still stand?" The human's voice came low, like a storm breaking. "Because I am not standing for me." With a sudden surge, he shoved the leader back a step. The market roared in disbelief. The woman stared, her heart racing. For the first time, the chains around her wrists felt lighter. Not because they were gone, but because her spirit was no longer crushed. The human's blood stained the ground, his body broken. But in that moment, he looked like something more than a man. Something unshakable, and the crowd knew. This fight was no longer about one alien woman. It was about everyone watching. The market was no longer a place of laughter. Where once the crowd had cheered for pain, now they watched in silence. The horned leader had stepped back, shaken for the first time. His claws dripped with human blood, yet the man still stood. wounded, trembling but unbroken. The woman in chains stared at him, her silver eyes wide. She had seen warriors fight with fury, with weapons, with hate, but never had she seen one fight with nothing but his will. The human's chest rose and fell heavily. His breaths were short, each one sharp with pain. But his eyes burned with the same fire, steady and unyielding. The leader growled, trying to gather the crowd back to his side. "Look at him! Look at the weak creature. He bleeds, he stumbles, he breaks. This is the fate of humans. This is the fate of all who stand against me." But his words did not carry the same power as before. The crowd whispered, "Why does he still stand? He should be dead already. No one takes so many strikes and rises again." The leader roared louder. "He is nothing." Yet even as he shouted, the human stepped forward. His voice was faint, but it carried across the market like a whisper in the wind. "You call me nothing. But you fear me. That is why you strike so hard." The crowd froze. The leader's face twisted with rage. "Fear? I fear no one." The human's lips curved slightly, not into a smile, but into something stronger. "Then why do you tremble?" The leader's hands twitched. His claws shook. The crowd noticed it too. Whispers turned into murmurs, murmurs into quiet voices of doubt. The woman closed her eyes for a moment, her heart racing. When she opened them again, she saw something new, hope flickering not only in her but in the faces of others. She lifted her head and spoke, her voice clear despite her pain. "He bleeds for me, though he owes me nothing. He stands for me, though he gains nothing. Tell me, leader, who among you would bleed for your own people the way this human bleeds for a stranger?" The crowd gasped. They had never heard her speak like this. Chains rattled as she pulled against them, her spirit no longer silent. The leader roared, pointing at her, "Be silent, slave." But the human moved again, stepping in front of her. His body was broken, his movement slow, but his stance was strong. His words cut through the air. "No, she will not be silent. Not anymore." The crowd's voices grew louder. "Why does he protect her? He suffers for her. Yet she stands taller because of him. Is this what strength looks like?" The leader snarled, desperate to keep control. "You fools. This is weakness. Look at his blood. Look at his wounds. He is dying." But another voice came from the crowd. One of the younger aliens, his voice uncertain but loud enough. "Yet he does not fall." More whispers followed. "He does not fall. He endures. He resists." The leader bared his teeth, furious. He lunged at the human again, claws raised high. But this time the human did not dodge. He lifted his arms, blocking the strike, and though the force threw him to the ground, he rose again, coughing blood but still alive. The woman shouted, her voice fierce now. "You cannot break him. You cannot break me. You cannot break us." The chains around her clanged as she pulled hard, sparks flying where metal met stone. The crowd gasped at her strength, born from new hope. The leader turned to her enraged. "Silence!" But the human's voice rang out again, louder than before, his words sharp and heavy. "No one here will be silent." "Not anymore." The crowd's voices rose, no longer whispers but shouts. Some still cheered for the leader, but many more shouted for the human. For the first time, the market was divided. The leader's face twisted with panic. He could feel control slipping from him like sand through his claws. His fury grew hotter, but his power felt weaker. The human swayed on his feet, close to collapse, but his eyes glowed with conviction. He looked at the crowd, then at the woman, and spoke. "This is the truth of power. It is not in chains, not in whips, not in fear. Power is in standing for one another. Power is in giving hope where there is none." The woman's eyes filled with fire. She stood taller, no longer just a victim. Even chained, even bleeding, she was unbroken beside him. The crowd erupted, voices clashing, some in anger, some in wonder, some in belief. The spark had caught, and in that moment the leader realized something that filled him with dread. This was no longer about one human, one woman, or one game. This was the start of something far greater. A fire had been lit, and it would not be put out. The market shook with noise. Half the crowd shouted for the leader, half shouted for the human. For the first time in years, the horned leader felt the sound cut against him. His chest heaved. His pride burned hotter than fire. He had whipped many into silence, broken many into dust. But this human, bleeding, shaking, almost falling, would not bow. And worse, the crowd was watching him differently, not with fear, not with blind loyalty, but with doubt. The leader roared, lifting his claws high. Enough, this ends now. He charged forward, his horns aimed to crush the human. The crowd gasped. The woman in chains pulled against her bonds, shouting, "Look out!" The human swayed, his legs weak, but his eyes were sharp. He did not step back, he waited. His breathing slowed, his body tensed. And when the leader struck, the human moved. Not with the speed of a beast, not with the power of claws or horns, but with precision. He caught the leader's wrist in his bleeding hand and twisted hard. The crowd gasped. The leader staggered, his arm forced aside. The strike missed. The human used the moment. He stepped in close and slammed his shoulder into the leader's chest. The impact sent the larger alien stumbling back a step. The crowd exploded in shouts. Some cheered. Others cried out in disbelief. He pushed him! The leader stumbled. The leader's face twisted with shock. No one had forced him back before. Not a soldier, not a warrior, certainly not a human. The human stood tall, swaying, covered in blood, but his voice rang out clear. Strength is not only muscle. Strength is in will. And my will not break. The crowd froze, the words burning into them like fire. The leader growled, fury surging. He attacked again, faster, heavier. His claws tore through the air. His horns lowered like blades. But the human was ready. Step after step he moved with purpose. He ducked under a swing. He caught another strike with his arm, letting it cut him but using the pain to fuel his focus. He twisted the leader's horned head to the side, forcing him off balance again. The crowd roared louder with every move. He fights back. The human resists. Impossible. The woman's eyes widened. She had thought his strength was only endurance. But now she saw something more. Each move was not random, it was skill. He fought not with fury, but with control. The leader roared in rage. You dare humiliate me? The human's voice came calm, steady. No, you humiliate yourself. The words cut deeper than claws. The crowd gasped, many turning their eyes away from the leader. Furious, the leader swung his whip of claws one last time. The human caught it mid-air again. His hands bled, his skin tore, but he pulled with everything he had. The leader stumbled forward, crashing to his knees. The market erupted in chaos. Shouts, gasps, cries. For the first time, the leader was down on the ground before another. The human stood over him, barely holding himself up but unyielding. His eyes blazed. His chest rose like fire. He whispered, loud enough for all to hear, "Your power ends here." The leader snarled, trying to rise. But the human pressed a foot on the whip, keeping it pinned. His voice rang out again. You used fear to rule. You used chains to control. But fear breaks when hope rises, and hope is stronger than you. The crowd trembled. They had never heard words like this. They had never felt the weight of hope before. The woman in chains shouted, her voice fierce and free of fear. He speaks the truth. Look at him. Look at what one human has done. If he can stand against the whip, then so can we. The crowd erupted. Some shouted in agreement, their hearts ignited. Others protested, clinging to the old rule. But the spark had grown into flame. The leader roared, his pride shattering. No, they are mine. They belong to me. The human's answer was firm, like stone. No one belongs to you. He bent, grabbed the whip from the ground, and with one motion snapped it across his knee. The leather tore. The handle broke. The weapon that had ruled the market for so long was gone in 2 pieces. The crowd gasped louder than ever. The leader froze, staring at the broken whip in disbelief. His weapon, his symbol, his power, destroyed by the very human he mocked. The human's voice rang out once more, echoing in every heart. This is the end of your game. The market roared with voices. Some cheered for the leader. Many more shouted for the human. And in that moment, the balance had shifted. The woman's eyes glistened with fire. Even in chains, she no longer felt like a prisoner. She felt like a warrior again. And the leader, once untouchable, now stood trembling before the will of one bleeding man. The turn had come, and nothing in the market would ever be the same. The whip lay broken in the dust. 2 pieces of leather and wood, useless now. The crowd that once laughed, once cheered cruelty, now stood divided. Some shouted for the leader, but many more shouted for the human. Their voices rose like a storm, shaking the market. The horned leader's chest heaved with rage. His claws trembled. His pride was bleeding worse than the human's body. Never had anyone stood against him. Never had anyone broken his weapon. He growled, pointing at the human. You will regret this. You will not leave this place alive. The human swayed on his feet, blood running down his back. His body screamed in pain, but his eyes were calm, steady, unbroken. He lifted his chin and answered, Maybe. But even if I fall, you have already lost. The crowd gasped. His words struck deeper than any blade. The leader roared in fury and charged. His horns cut through the air. His claws aimed for the human's heart, but the human did not step aside. Instead, he turned, placing himself once more in front of the chained woman. The claws slashed down, but this time the human caught the leader's wrists. Blood poured from his palms, but his grip held firm. The leader snarled, trying to push forward. But the human, though broken, forced him back. Step by step, the leader stumbled. The crowd erupted in shock. The woman's silver eyes blazed. She pulled hard against her chains, shouting, Do not stand alone! And then, with a loud crack, the chain on her wrist snapped. The crowd gasped. She broke the second with a roar of defiance, sparks flying as metal shattered. She was free. The leader's eyes widened in horror. The woman stood tall beside the human, her body covered in blood, but her spirit fierce. Together, side by side, they faced him. The human's voice rang out. Low but strong. No more chains, the woman shouted with him. No more whips. The crowd exploded. Some cheered wildly, others panicked. The marketplace shook with chaos. The leader tried to roar above the noise. Silence. You will all obey me. But his voice no longer carried power. Too many eyes had seen him fall. Too many hearts had felt the spark of hope. The younger aliens in the crowd stepped forward, their voices rising. We do not obey. No more games. No more cruelty. The leader's face twisted with rage. He lunged again, claws flashing. But this time, the woman struck first. With her chains still hanging from her wrists, she swung them like weapons, the iron crashing against his horns. The leader staggered back, stunned. The human, though weak, moved beside her. He shoved the leader down once more, pressing him into the dust. The market roared. The people who had once thrown coins now threw stones, breaking the silence of their fear. The leader's power was crumbling before their eyes. The human raised his voice over the chaos, calling to the crowd, Power is not fear. Power is not chains. Power is standing together, protecting one another. The words struck like lightning. The market that had been built on cruelty now burned with something new, rebellion. The leader struggled on the ground, his pride shattered. He looked up, snarling, but saw only the fire in their eyes. He had lost them. The woman stood tall beside the human, her voice carrying like thunder. Today we rise. Today we are free. The crowd roared louder than ever, their cries shaking the stone walls of the city. Some rushed forward to tear down the stage. Others broke the cages where more prisoners were held. The market became a storm, not of cruelty, but of freedom. The human staggered, nearly falling, but the woman caught him. She looked into his tired eyes, her voice softer now. You gave them hope. You gave me hope. Why? The human's lips curved faintly. His words were weak but clear. Because one person is enough to start a fire. The woman stared at him, her chest heavy with something she had not felt in years. Belief. She tightened her grip on him, keeping him upright as the crowd's chant grew louder. No more chains. No more whips. No more fear. The flames of rebellion spread from voice to voice, heart to heart. What began as one man standing alone had become an army of voices, an unstoppable wave. The horned leader tried to rise again, but now even his own guards hesitated. They looked at him, then at the human, then at the woman. And slowly, one by one, they stepped back. The leader's roar was lost in the sound of thousands rising together. The human raised his head, his body broken, but his spirit shining brighter than ever. His voice rang out one last time. This is only the beginning. Today the chains fall here, tomorrow they fall everywhere. The crowd answered with thunder. The woman lifted his arm high, standing with him before all. The image burned into every eye. The bleeding human, the freed woman, the broken whip. The fire had risen, and it would spread across the stars.